talk to Rick, the first thing I say is, hey brother, how's the greatest wrestler of all time doing? You know, because I feel that way. I mean, if you talk about the consummate professional, I mean, I haven't followed Rick's career in the last couple of years because he's been in and out, you know, and all around, he hasn't been working full time, but I mean, when he was on, when he took the ball and ran with it, you know, several people have been passed the ball and they'll run for a couple of years, or they'll run for 5 years, but not too many guys run 30 or 35 years on top. And when Ric Flair was passed the football, I mean, he ran with it. And, you know, the way he carried the NWA belt, you know, the way he just portrayed himself as a champion. Not only was he a great wrestler, but he had the great gimmick. I mean, the platinum hair, and he took the gorgeous Jordans and the Buddy Rogers thing to a whole nother level. I mean, the Learjets, the limousines, and the crazy part was he lived that lifestyle. You know, just like Macho did. I mean, Macho was Macho 24 hours a day. Ooh, yeah. You know better than I did, man. You had to do business with him. You know, he was my friend, but you had to do business with him. He was a tough cookie to crack. But, you know, these guys, they lived it, especially Ric Flair. So when I talk about Flair, I still think of him across the board with everything that he did, from the interviews. I mean, he was the nature boy in those interviews, brother. And then when he was in the bar hanging out with the girls, he was still Ric Flair, the nature boy. You know, and so everything he did was such a constant that I think of him as the guy that really set the standard. If you want to live and be in 24 hours a day, be a wrestler, I think of Ric Flair.
And this, by the way, isn't my way of trying to position anybody against anybody, because they're all phenomenal wrestlers and have all left significant impacts on this business. But how would you compare Roddy Piper to Ric Flair in terms of their impact on the business?
It's a tough one, but it's not too tough. I mean, you know, Ric Flair did business with everybody, you know, and I love Roddy to death, no doubt. I mean, Ric Flair, he would go in to Houston or Dallas and Kerry Von Erich would beat him right in the middle of the ring. You know, he'd come into somewhere else and Harley Race would beat him right in the middle of the ring. And, you know, I did business with Rick, and he always wanted to do the job, always wanted to put me over, because he knew if he put me over and he took off with the belt or whatever the deal was, there'd be another one, and there'd be another one after that. He was always thinking business. And I was on the phone with Roddy Piper a couple months ago, and I was teasing him. I said, dude, we had the war to settle the score. We drew a ton of money. Piper and Hogan was red hot. But can you imagine if we'd have actually talked and been friends? You know, if you'd actually done a job and put me over, and then I would have done a job and put you over, you know how much business we could have done? But instead, when you wouldn't put me over, I went, I'm not putting you over. Forget it. You know? But I told him, teasing, I said, can you imagine, brother, 25, 30 years ago, if we would have actually talked one time? We never even talked. You know, he had his clique of guys he hung out with, and I did my thing, and we never really meshed. You know, we're great friends now, but back then, I mean, we could have really pulled some shenanigans, you know, if we were on the same page. So that's the difference. Ric Flair was, not that Piper was in business, but, you know, you got to be able to put somebody over, or so that you can come back again and have that next match, you know. And that's what Andre taught me, you know. Because I had promoters, a lot of promoters, and you grew up in Minnesota and watched me. Vern Gagne didn't even want me to drop down to a knee. I mean, I had the promoter going, when somebody drops kick, you just stumble back. You know, when somebody hits you with a punch, don't sell it. Don't go off your feet. I mean, that's a heat getter. You know, and you get the promoter telling me that, so it's, you know, it's hard for the guys in the dressing room to understand that, you know, so it's, you know, there's a lot of stuff between the lines a lot of people don't know.
And we're going to get to your questions, by the way, but this needs to be fun for me too. And these are a lot of these questions I've never really asked Hulk before. But we've talked about wrestlers and guys like Rick and Roddy and Andre, obviously, a lot. What about the promoters? You know, what in the early parts of your career, who are the promoters that you recall now, especially looking back, being the most impressed with?
Well, the guy that I was most impressed with was Vince McMahon Sr. You know, and I'd worked for other promoters. I started out working with Eddie Graham, who was great in Florida. And, you know, then I worked for a guy in Pensacola, Alabama, the Fullers. Then I went and worked for the Jerry Jarrett Memphis. And I kept quitting wrestling. You know, after I went to all those territories, I always go back to Florida and go back to work. And then I get a call from New York, and both the Briscoe brothers go, dude, you know, you're a New York guy. It was a big territory. If you were 300 pounds, you were a medium-sized guy. And when I first went up there, I was like 320 pounds. I was one of the smaller guys, you know, smaller wrestlers. And they said, oh man, New York is perfect for you. It'll be great. So when I went up there, you know, Vince McMahon Sr. had those glasses he wore down on his nose. He clicked the quarters, he didn't look at you, you know. And I was calling myself Terry the Hulk Boulder. And Vince McMahon gave me the name Hulk Hogan. You know, I said, Hulk Hogan, what does that mean? He had all these different wrestlers like San Martino for the Italian Americans and Chief Jay Strongbow for the Native Indian Americans and Putski for the Polish Americans, and Hogan was supposed to be for the Irish Americans. So, you know, the name stuck, and the name became so powerful, you know, because Vince Sr. gave me that name, that now that I look back on it, you know, that no matter what the man does, Hulk Hogan, or whether it's good or bad or indifferent, the fans are so loyal, and the name's so strong, you know, that name will live forever because he gave him such a great name, you know. And then, you know, his son took over, Vince McMahon. He had the vision
Vince
of
who?
Vince McMahon.
Oh, that guy.
Yeah, no, he took over, and he kind of like took over where his father left off. Instead of being territorial, Vince had this huge vision to go international. Then I went to work for the bad guy here, and he came up with the whole NWO idea and changed the game again. And you know, we're at Impact Wrestling, and we're working our tails off with Impact Wrestling. So there's been a lot of great moments in wrestling, but you know, if I had to really pick one out, it'd be, you know, Vince McMahon Sr. for branding me with that Hulk Hogan name. And I didn't have a clue. You know, he's the one that said that's the name to stick with.
What about Vertigo? Let's talk a little bit about Vertigo, just our own.